If you think 2020 was the worst year the human race has ever known, you'd be dead wrong. Instead, let's look at some real candidates vying for that unfortunate title. Here's the 5 worst years ever in recorded human history, the 5th being the undisputed worst. 1816 was known as the year without a summer. The culprit for the drop in heat was due to volcanic ash that covered skies around the world. The year before, Mount Tambora on the island of Sumbawa, which is present-day Indonesia, erupted, causing the most powerful volcanic eruption ever recorded in human history, spewing tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, causing temperatures to fall around the planet. Around 11,000 people were killed immediately in the intense explosion, and thousands more died in the months and years that followed due to the long-term effects. As a result of the cooling, temperatures plummeted and crops failed. This led to widespread malnutrition, famine, and death. In addition, a wet, cold, and even snowy summer gripped the northern hemisphere, leading to the coldest recorded average summer temperature for Europe between the years 1766 to 2000. Parts of the world also witnessed extreme flooding, drought, and wildfires. For many people, it seemed like the world was coming to an end. The year 1943 was a turning point in World War II, but it was also one of the darkest years in human history. The war raged on, with some of the largest and bloodiest battles taking place on both the eastern and western fronts. However, the most horrific event of 1943 was the Holocaust. The Nazis perfected their machine of systematic deportation and genocide, and by the spring of 1943, more than 1.3 million Jews had been murdered. Another tragedy that occurred in 1943 was the Bengal famine, which killed around 3 million people in the Bengal province of British India. Food scarcity had been exacerbated by an increase in the volume of food Britain exported from its Indian provinces. In 1347, the Black Death bubonic plague was the deadliest pandemic in human history, killing an estimated 200 million people between 1347 and 1349. It ravaged most of Eurasia and parts of North Africa, and an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's population died. The plague arrived in Europe via 12 ships that docked at the Sicilian port of Messina in late 1347. The sailors were either dead or dying from a mysterious disease, and the plague quickly spread across the continent. People were terrified of the Black Death, and many believed it was divine punishment, and massacres occurred across the continent. The culprit was the Yersinia pestis bacterium, carried by rat fleas. The painful symptoms it caused included fever, vomiting, bleeding, and inflamed lymph nodes swelling into pus-filled boils. Mortality rates following infection were catastrophically high. The Black Death was a truly horrific event. In 1918, as World War I was nearing its end, some of the bloodiest battles were still unfolding in Europe. While war-ravaged nations contemplated peace, a new global threat emerged, the Spanish flu pandemic. The precise origin of this lethal strain of influenza is uncertain, but it seemingly arose simultaneously in multiple locations like the US, Europe, and Asia. As troops returned home following the war, they unknowingly spread the virus worldwide. Without any vaccine or treatment, the H1N1 flu swept across the globe in successive waves, infecting about 500 million people. In an effort to slow transmission, authorities mandated protective measures like wearing masks and closing public gathering places. But over 3 devastating years, the flu killed approximately 50 million people globally until it finally burned itself out. The year 536 AD was arguably the worst year to ever be alive. This infamous year marked the beginning of an 18-month period in which Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia were plunged into a state of perpetual darkness and severely cold temperatures, leading to widespread famine and misery. The cause was a massive volcanic eruption in Iceland that spewed ash across the northern hemisphere, blocking sunlight for over a year. Summer temperatures dropped between 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Celsius, devastating crops and resulting in starvation for millions. This tragic event ushered in a decade of catastrophe for humanity. Two more volcanic eruptions followed later in the 540s AD, leading to the coldest decade recorded in the past 2,300 years. The prolonged cold and famine provided the perfect breeding ground for the first bubonic plague pandemic, known as the Plague of Justinian. This deadly plague afflicted the Eastern Roman Empire and regions around the Mediterranean between 541 to 542 AD, killing an estimated 25 to 50 million people and wiping out 35 to 55% of the population. This plague, coupled with the overall climate upheaval, aided the collapse of the Eastern Roman Empire. The effects were so devastating that historians refer to this time as the beginning of the Dark Ages.